passages, head to the right to Matthew's gospel, to Matthew chapter 18. And some of you, how many of y'all are eights on the Enneagram? Eights on the Enneagram. Okay, my guess would be some of you eights are very familiar with this passage. If you're a female eight, you've probably cross-stitched it. It might be hanging on your wall. Matthew 18, beginning in verse 15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church, tell it to everybody. Go ahead and get on EFAM and just blow the news everywhere in church. And if he refuses to listen, even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. When I was in high school, we had a youth pastor for a season who was really, really passionate. And he used to wave his Bible around like this. When I was in my 20s, I tried to imitate it, and I hit a woman upside the head with Genesis. But just boom, went out of my Bible and hit this woman in the head. I was like, I'm so sorry. They never invited me back. But he would swing his Bible around, quote from Matthew 18, and he would tell all of us in the youth ministry that we were supposed to go and verbally confront, better yet, assault our friends who were partying after football games or smoking pot, or worse still, engaged in heavy petting. Now, I know I'm older than the median of elevation, but can I get a witness? Did any of y'all have a pastor who used the phraseology heavy petting? Do you remember, Holly? And it confused me. It confused me a lot. I remember being at this kind of fire and brimstone revival. This was the late 70s. I was in middle school in Central Florida. And a pastor got up and started swinging his Bible around. Veins were popping out. And he said, any of you who've been involved in heavy petting, want you to come to the altar and repent. And I'd come there on the van with our little First Baptist church. And I was nervous because I was afraid the van would leave me because I didn't really always believe Billy Graham when he said they'd stay. But I sat there and I thought, have I? I love our beagle. We had the sweetest beagle named Smokey. And I thought, have I just inadvertently like rubbed her fur the wrong way, or maybe pet her with a little bit too much weight? Have I caused my dog canine injury? I don't know. This verse has been used, y'all, to shame teenagers who struggle with frisky feelings, I think since the beginning of Baptist time anyway. It's also been used to justify ecclesiastical expulsion. In other words, this passage, Matthew 18, has been used as the sole passage to justify kicking people out of church. Do you hear me? Now, I want to take just a second here, because I'm not advocating for anarchy in church. I'm really not. For church to be a healthy, thriving community, there have to be parameters. This is not just crazy town. And so we need spiritual leaders. We need people holding us accountable. But I really think that when we take this verse as the proof text to kick people out of fellowship, I think we're missing the main point Jesus was making. It's right there in front of us, and I've missed it my whole life. I am 56 years old. I have a master's in theology. I'm 2 years away, God willing, from having a doctorate in redemptive hermeneutics. I have studied my behind off because I'm single, and it's the only way I get any kind of endorphins. And so I've got scads of books on exegesis and eschatology and redemptive hermeneutics and socio-historical context. But it wasn't until this last summer I was sitting in a class listening to a professor unpack the redemptive thread in Matthew 18 that I went, oh, Jesus. It's Jesus speaking, and Jesus says, treat them as tax collectors and Gentiles. How did Jesus always treat tax collectors and Gentiles? Matthew's writing it. Matthew was a tax collector before he encountered Jesus, and Jesus said, come be a fisher of men with me. Matt, change your Facebook status. You're going to be an evangelist, but you were a tax collector. Do you remember Luke 19? If you don't remember it right offhand, I bet you've sang Luke 19. There was wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Remember Zacchaeus? Climbed up in a sycamore tree to meet Jesus. Y'all, he was the CEO of the IRS division in Jericho. It was implied by Dr. Luke that Zacchaeus got filthy rich by padding to what he was assessing his Jewish countrymen and then skimming off the top before wiring those funds to Rome. I mean, this was not just a tax collector. This was a tax collector without scruples. And yet when Jesus meets Zach, do you think he calls him out for his duplicity? No, he invites himself over for dinner. And after Zach and Jesus hang out, do you remember Zach's response? I'll give half of what I own to the poor, half of what I own to prison ministry and to orphans in Uganda and to feed the homeless here in Charlotte. I'll give half of what I own. I'm so happy to trade in my Bentley for a smart car. And anyone whom I'm defrauded, I'll repay them 4 times what I initially stole. Treat them as tax collectors and Gentiles. Remember Genesis 12? When God says to our great-great-granddaddy Abraham, through you, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. They'll all meet Jesus. The promise goes all the way back to the beginning. It's fulfilled in the work and person of Jesus Christ. Paul said, my whole ministry is so that Gentiles will come to know Jesus. 2/3 of the New Testament is about outsiders being drawn in to the unconditional love of our Creator, Redeemer. Treat them as Gentiles and tax collectors. Do you really think he intended that to be punitive? Yo, we use the Bible as a club, and it was never meant to be used as a club. It's true. It's authoritative. There are parameters for abundant life in here. This isn't a joke, but it's not punitive.